On this episode of Locked On Lightning, after a big win the other night, the Bolts will take a look at revenge this coming weekend against the Cats. We talk about the possibility, can the Lightning at this level catch the Leafs? All that coming up and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Happy Friday, everybody. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Go ahead, subscribe to our channel. Hit that thumbs up button below and comment below. Let us know how you feeling about this Lightning team, because there is plenty to be excited about after the trade deadline, picking up two big pieces that look like it kind of stopped the flooding or the water coming out of the dam, if you want to look at it that way. And we have seen a completely different Lightning team since then, outscoring their opponents 13-3, and two very good opponents in the Flyers and the Rangers. We talk about if they could continue to play at that level, can the Lightning go on and catch the Toronto Maple Leafs for that third spot in the Atlantic Division? We also talk about looking at revenge, because this Lightning team, they have not played well against the Panthers this year. They're going to meet up tomorrow afternoon in Sunrise. We talk about that game, as well as wrapping things up with, I think, two of the most likable players and two of the hottest players in terms of performance right now on the Lightning, and that is Anthony Duclair and Braydon Point. That deadly duo, how are they going to help the Lightning get to where we want them to be? But yeah, so let's start things off. I mean, look, tomorrow afternoon is, and I spoke about it, really this 3-game stretch has really been, it's going to be super important for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And because I think it's, you pick up, and I think I said if you go 2 out of 3, I think that's a phenomenal thing to do. And what I mean is, so we have the Rangers, we got the Panthers tomorrow, and then next Tuesday we got Vegas. 3 teams that very could well win the Stanley Cup. And they already got it out of the bag last night, that first W. And now it's kind of, you pick up another one either tomorrow or Tuesday, preferably tomorrow, because then you have a couple of days off going into that West Coast trip starting in Vegas. I think you really set yourself up for a great stretch down for the rest of the season. And it really all starts tomorrow. I mean, this Panthers team is just absolutely stacked. I think if they weren't before the trade deadline, I think we could say that this Panthers team after the trade deadline is probably a top 3 favorite to win the Stanley Cup this year. They picked up Kyle Okposo from Buffalo. They got Tarasenko from Ottawa. And I really think that adds some much needed scoring, and that's kind of been the story for the Lightning as well, as when they were trying to win the Cup every year, was picking up those last scoring pieces at the deadline. And that's going to be an interesting kind of back and forth tomorrow, because if the Lightning play like what we've seen over the last 2 games, and that something that we really can't guarantee on a nightly basis, and we spoke about it on last night's episode, how really if the Lightning play at that level, we were having the conversation about, are they a playoff team just yet? And I said that we need to see that this team could play a full 60 minutes on a nightly basis. It's not just 2 periods here, 2 periods there, or even a complete game here or a complete game, 3 games down the road. It has to be on a nightly basis, because we saw it in that series against Toronto last year. That was really something that they struggled with. I mean, they won game 1, and then they kind of just fell asleep for the rest of the series until about game 4 and 5. But by then it was pretty much over by then. I think really the Lightning backed themselves into a corner that they really couldn't get out of. And that's something that we're going to really closely pay attention to tomorrow, because I think when we look at this Panthers team, probably it's a fair statement to make to say that this team is probably the best team in the Eastern Conference. If you want to throw Boston there, they look like they're faltering. You look at maybe Carolina, that's probably a team that you could say that if not the Panthers, it's the Carolina Hurricanes. Even, we saw last night with New York. They have good players, but they still have some holes here and there. Not to take away the performance that Tampa had last night. I mean, the Lightning played as nearly as perfect in those last 2 periods as you could possibly get. But you look at more polished off teams like Carolina Hurricanes, and especially tomorrow, the Florida Panthers. Those are the teams that really you have to measure yourself up against, because regardless of if you feel like they're going to win the cup or not, you still have to take into account the performances that you've had against them down the stretch, because that's really something that I think is a good measuring stick and kind of a good heat check kind of moment to kind of reflect back on as we wrap up the NHL season and look towards the playoffs and say, this team is ready or this team is not ready. Those are the performances. And even the upcoming series in Canada against Toronto and Montreal, especially that game against Toronto on the road, I mean, that's going to have playoff vibes right there. I thought last night, for at least the first 2 periods, that those were playoff vibes as well. And tomorrow night in Sunrise, that's going to be an absolutely electric game, unless one of these teams completely falls asleep at the wheel to start things off, because, the other team, whether it be Tampa or Florida, whoever is the team that's down early on, if they're not clicking, the other team is rolling right now. And so that's why it's really going to be a very good measuring stick game. I mean, Florida comes into this one with 94 points. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They lost their last game, but listen, that's a team that we've seen them and we're very familiar with them by now. I mean, they're a team that really is able to bounce back. The Lightning 5-4 in their last 10. They're on a 2-game heater, like we said. And I think that really at the end of the day, you look at these two teams, maybe for those last couple of lines there for Florida, I think that these two teams really stack up evenly. I think Florida has a little bit more depth. I think that really it's going to come down to a stereotypical cliche Lightning Florida Panthers game, and that is good goaltending, big hits, very physical early on. Florida's going to try and get under Tampa's skin. I would say in that response that Tampa needs to go back at them. That means that you're going to have big performances out of Mike Yesema, Nick Paul. Your defensemen like Chernak and Hedman are going to be key in this one. Radish as well. Perbix is going to need to step up. And really, you're going to have to set the tone early on to allow your team to get settled in, because these aren't normal NHL games. Whenever you're in a rivalry game, as we all know, or maybe if you're new to this whole, if this is your first year covering Lightning hockey or following Lightning hockey, you may not be familiar with some of the history between these two teams, but there's a lot of bad blood there. And some people might not believe that, but it's true. You have one team who's been there and done it over the last 5 years, and you have a team that just tasted what it's like to go to the Stanley Cup final for the first time, at least with this group. And so you kind of have, and maybe it's probably gone by now. I'm definitely saying it's gone by now, but you've had this dynamic of big brother, little brother in Florida. And so those games are going to be really important, or this game is really going to be important as you kind of look forward for the Lightning, because you're going to see I think, especially if Tampa loses this game by a narrow margin, I think really you're going to look at almost every shift as a do or die situation. Now, it all depends on, how you start, obviously. But I think more importantly for the Tampa Bay Lightning, it's going to really depend on how they finish in this game. So let me know in the comments below how you're feeling about this game. I like the Lightning's chances as good as any night. I mean, the past two performances that they've put on the last couple of games have been spectacular. And I think that really, at the end of the day, if they get off to a good start, if you get a couple of goals on Bobrovsky early on, don't allow him to settle in, I think you're putting yourself in a good position to where you could kind of not take your foot off the gas pedal, but there won't be, you're going to be able to slow down the game for yourself and not burn yourself out early, where Florida's depth will definitely come into play later on. So you're going to definitely want to fend off that attack and that push at the end of the third period if Florida is down. So let me know your predictions for this game. I'm calling a narrow one. I'm going to say 3-2 Tampa. We're going to see big performances out of their guns in Cooch, Duclair, Point, Hagel, Paul. Like I said, it's going to be a very physical and defensive-minded game, I think, for Tampa Bay. The Blue Liners are going to have to come up big. Hedman's going to have to take a little bit more aggression into account on both sides of the ice, and we're going to need to see Stamkos really come up big and really pick his chances like we saw in this past Rangers game. So coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk about, since the Lightning are at a high level right now, is it possible or is it even remotely in the cards for them to go ahead and catch the Toronto Maple Leafs? We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about our first sponsors of today's show, and that's our friends over at Robinhood Retirement. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you could still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most of your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info, claim as of quarter 1, 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. So as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. We just hit 800 the other day, and it's all because of you, the listener, you, the fan, and I am very, very thankful for all of that. So thank you very much, and continue your support. St. Paddy's Day is this weekend, so whether you celebrate Saturday or observe Sunday, play this at your party in Tampa Bay, especially. Go ahead as you get into that 6:00 game tomorrow night against the Panthers. Definitely get yourself in the mood. Put down the Irish folk music playlist for a minute. Throw on Locked On Lightning to get yourself ready for that game. So we're talking about we're setting our sights more a little bit higher now, and I think we can because the Lightning have been playing not only well over the last couple of games, but it's because at the level they're playing and also who they're playing. They've played two playoff teams out of the Metropolitan Division. And if you don't think that holds any weight, the Metropolitan Division, I think, has really been one of the premier divisions over the last couple of years, just because everything has been just so close in that division when it comes to playoff time. More times than not, you've seen really a lot of the top teams out of the Eastern Conference, minus Toronto, Boston, and Tampa, coming out of that division and really just wreaking havoc during the regular season. Now, on the flip side of that, since those teams beat up on each other so much, I think that's why they don't have as much success during the playoffs. But nonetheless, I mean, we could look at the Metropolitan Division and I think to a certain degree make the case that it is a little bit, maybe slightly a little bit more competitive than the Atlantic Division. Now with the Red Wings getting better and Buffalo kind of starting to get it together now, they're making a run lately. And then you have the emergence of Florida, and of course Tampa, Toronto, and Boston. That this Atlantic Division is shaping into possibly a juggernaut of a division. But nonetheless, you look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, the level, like I said, the level they've been playing with and how they've been playing, and I think is really the important thing. And it can't help you. I can't help but wonder, and I'm sure some fans are thinking about this too, some listeners, that if they continue to play like this, which, first of all, playing like this and figuring it out like this in mid-March is, I think, everything that a Lightning fan could dream for at this point in time. And if they continue to play like this, regardless of what Toronto does, and mind you, Toronto is at 84 points right now, 7-3 in their last 10, winners of their last 2. It's very possible. It's not out of the realm of possibility that the Lightning could catch up to them and leapfrog them. Now, I don't know if they're going to go after Boston. I mean, Boston and Florida are kind of in their own 1-2 race right there for the top spot in the division, as well as I think the President's Trophy is in play too. Yeah, it is, other than maybe Vancouver. But you have a really good opportunity here, especially going into the playoffs. And I think that there are some players on this team, especially John Cooper. I wouldn't put it past John Cooper to maybe have this in the back of his mind. And this could very well influence some roster moves, especially with Vasilevsky down the stretch. I'm sure the thought has crossed his mind maybe after last night's game, and especially with the what-if scenario, if they beat Florida tomorrow night, that you could set yourself up not only with getting that third spot, but you're also on a hot streak, as well as you don't have to go against the best team in the conference. And I brought it up last night, and another listener brought it up last night too. I think it's very much a known thing now that Ranger fans don't want to play the Lightning in the first round. I think they're petrified of Tampa Bay, playoff Tampa Bay. And I think that Ranger fans are secretly wishing good things upon the Tampa Bay Lightning, because I think they would prefer to play Toronto than or even New York, or they probably want to play the Islanders or Toronto. I don't think Toronto's going to falter like that. That would be incredibly shocking. But I think that overall, this is a kind of a very unexpected development for the Lightning. I think that it was something that I kind of alluded to, not fully realizing what could have possibly morphed out of that about a week ago. How we're really on scoreboard watch now. And just the other night, Detroit got their doors blown off by Buffalo. We were celebrating that. But I think that also we got to start doing that with Toronto, because it is very possible to see this Toronto team falter, as we kind of all expect them to at certain times. And especially if Vasilevsky gets hot around now, because Toronto's their goaltending situation, as we all know, is not really stellar. So their schedule going forward real quick is they got the Hurricanes tomorrow. They got the Flyers and the Capitals back-to-back next week. And then you got Edmonton over the weekend on a back-to-back with Carolina, Jersey, Washington, and Buffalo to round out the month of March. And that kind of ties in with what I said about how important this really the month of March schedule is, and especially that West Coast trip. I talked about it, I believe, if not yesterday, two episodes ago, how really you could come out of that West Coast trip really doing good things for yourself in terms of standings. And I think that it now with you kind of are in earshot of Toronto, it really it amplifies the intensity of that West Coast trip. I've always equated the West Coast trips for the Lightning as kind of a vision quest. If you don't know about a vision quest, it's just look up the term. I'm not going to explain it, but it's kind of a coming of age, if you want to call it that, to simplify it more. You kind of go to the West Coast playing those later games, and yeah, those games are just mentally tough because of the time difference. But you come back, I feel like a lot of times, a better team for the most part. And I think that the Lightning, for the most part, have played very well on the West Coast the last couple of years. And it's, if you are able to win that Vegas game, you come out of this 3-game stretch winners of two of this 3. I think all bets are off at that point. I think you are very well within the realm of possibility of beating the Kings, as I think everybody could agree you should at that point in time. And then Anaheim and San Jose are games that really, I mean, there's no reason why you should lose those games unless this team is completely taken another step back, which if that happens, that's going to be very worrisome, especially given how well this team has played over the last 2 games. And I think we're past that, especially now that you've solidified your roster with Matt Dumba and Anthony Duclair. So let me know in the comments below how you're feeling about that. Is it realistic? Is it realistic to kind of take a peek, kind of talk about it, catching the Leafs? We'll keep an eye on that. We'll stick a pin on that going forward. So coming up in just a little bit, we're going to wrap things up with my 2 favorite Lightning players right now, and that's Anthony Duclair and Braydon Point coming up. We'll talk about their performances and how important their performances will be to this final stretch for the Tampa Bay Lightning coming up in just a bit. But first, let's talk about our last sponsor of the day, and that is our friends over at Ibotta. Now, do you love making money but also love spending money? Don't we all? Now, you can make money while you spend it every time you shop with Ibotta. Now, Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys, so you can make make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and get the real cash that you can cash out to bank your account, PayPal, or gift cards. Join over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. So right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONNHL. When you register, just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. So wrapping things up on the show, I just want to thank you all one last time for making us your first listen. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the pod. Also, give us a follow on our social media pages, LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as Lockdown_Lightning on Instagram. Give me a follow on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. I love hearing from all of you. Drop a comment below this video on our YouTube channel and drop some questions, man. Come on. I know some of you, the regulars out there. I'm just waiting for you all to drop your comments and your questions, because I will answer all of them, and I love answering all of them as long as they pertain to hockey, or their comments addressing to hockey. So go ahead and do that. So we're wrapping things up with really just the crowning achievement, I think, of this Lightning season in terms of performance. Now, obviously, Nikita Kucherov, at the rate he's going, especially if we get a couple more games like the one he had last night, he will win the MVP. I'm sure of it, as well as, finish the season with the most amount of points. But the two players that I think are really going to be important for the Tampa Bay Lightning down the stretch are Braydon Point and Anthony Duclair. And let me start real quick with Duclair. Duclair, I think, has been through 2 games so much better than we thought he was going to be in terms of the effect that he has on this team. Now, some people might say it's just circumstance. Some people might just say it's coincidence. But I see a completely different team with number 10. And that really shows you, and I said it when they made the deal, that he is going to bring a level of veteranship, a level of just multi-dimensional play to this team that really I don't think we have seen at the deadline in quite some time. We've seen very good talent come to this team over the deadline in years past, but no one ever with this amount of experience as Anthony Duclair. He's in the league 10 plus years now. He's, like I said, he has played at the lowest of lows in this league, and he's played on some of the best teams in this league. He was just on the Panthers last year, went to the Stanley Cup final with them, and just this year he was on San Jose. So that shows you the up and downs that he has had to go through in his career. And then just his ability to clean up in front of the net. That was a work of art last night, that goal that he scored. And you kind of felt like with him hanging down there that he was going to do that. And that really is just a very, very, I don't think you could really put a value on it because it's so important to what this team is trying to accomplish. I don't think they've really had a player this year other than maybe Nick Paul since really Corey Perry a couple of years ago when Corey Perry was just really playing phenomenally well in front of the net. They haven't really had a player other than Nick Paul, but he can't do it all the time, that has been really able to clean up like that in front of the net. And, we already have our bombers from outside of the crease, from the circles and from the high slot, guys that could shoot it from there and score. But to have a guy like that could kind of do a little bit of everything and not have to sacrifice anything, that's huge for this Lightning team. And then on the other side of that, Braydon Point, who, what else can you say? He is just a phenomenal player. Whenever everyone else is playing well, I said it last night, when everyone else is playing well, he plays well. And when he plays well, everybody else is playing well. And his ability, again, to really score from anywhere on the ice. When he is on, he is on. You saw it last night. He almost got his 4th goal last night on just the puck that he had his back completely turned to the goaltender, and he just flicked it behind him, and it hit the crossbar. Now, I don't know if that was intentional or not, or he was just trying to get something on net. But really, the guy is so valuable to this team, and I really think that, those guys are going to be so important down the stretch as the Lightning not only try to make the playoffs and keep their position in the wild card, but also, like I said before, they have a shot at Toronto. If they play this way, or if we get maybe even a third of what we get now consistently, this team will definitely really make some noise down the stretch against some very good teams that they have left on the schedule. And so really those two guys are going to be key, and they play on the first 2 lines. And I think that Cooper is going to put them together more often. As much as I really like Hagel and Point and Kucherov together, Duclair is, I think, just like I said, the effect that he has on the guys around him is going to definitely earn him, if he hasn't gotten some here and there throughout these last couple of games, which he has. It's definitely going to earn him some first line minutes. And that's the thing that is really different about this trade deadline as opposed to past trade deadlines. Like I said, we've gotten some very talented players that have walked into Amalie over the last couple of deadlines. Nick Paul, Barclay Goodrow, Blake Coleman. Those guys were phenomenal. Those guys were huge when it came to the role that they played on this team. But they never, I think, brought the level of experience. They never brought this level of being able to play on multiple lines quite like what we see from Anthony Duclair. Now, maybe this is recency bias, but I think it's also very truthful. So let me know in the comments below how you feel about that. Should Duclair get more minutes or possibly permanent minutes on the first line with Point and Kucherov? Let me know below. Let me know if you think that they could catch Toronto before the season ends, and let me know your predictions for Saturday's game against the Florida Panthers. And we'll be back on Monday to talk about that all and reflect on it all, as hopefully we're talking about a Lightning win. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.